Billionaires today live in the limelight. We follow them around for news and the next big thing that they're up to. But some made unbreakable financial records staying on the right path. Maybe this statement is too vague to make any sense. Well, I'm talking about Soros, the one guy who broke the Bank of England in a single day, gaining $1 billion on the 16th of September, 1992. And the only reason he's not highlighted as much as he should be is because of the political controversies. He's believed to be worth over $8 billion, but he has donated around $30 billion to health, education, human rights, and other global issues. He's made famous by the nickname, the man who broke England's bank, a title he achieved by short-selling the British pound in 1992 when England was part of a fixed exchange rate agreement among several European countries, the European exchange rate mechanism. Other countries were putting England under pressure to devalue its currency. England resisted the devaluation for some time, floated its currency, and the pound's value dropped. Soros understood the leverage he had and was able to take a $10 billion short position on the pound that earned him $1 billion. The trade is still considered one of the greatest ever, earning him the title. There's a bit more story on how the circumstances occurred, and Soros, with his exceptional command and trade, backed by his ability to take huge risks and deep pockets, he went all in and came out the winner. In World War II, European countries jointly formed a union to save themselves from similar destruction happening ever again. The principle was, if all the countries depended on each other for their economy, there is near zero chance of having another war. And to exercise this pact, euro was born. But before the single currency was introduced in 1999, Europe had another system to manage its currencies. In 1979, countries in the European community were just not ready to give up their currencies. Still, they agreed to link them together at a fixed exchange rate that will eventually remove the exchange fluctuations and boundaries of conducting business outside their borders. The new system was called the ERM, or the exchange rate mechanism. It looked like a great idea in theory and made things easier for many people, but it also put the national banks of those countries in a vulnerable position. And once a country became part of the ERM, they had to monitor the markets constantly and improvise if exchange rates deviated too much. If people were buying too much, the national banks would have to start selling, and if too many were selling, banks would have to buy. In a broader perspective, the system had major flaws. It considered every country on the same page without taking into account that every country has different interest rates, economic growth, resources, and inflation rates. It was impossible to keep things in a constant balance when the currencies were artificially linked to other economies. Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of the UK, understood this very well, which is why she opposed the idea and Britain was not part of ERM when it first started. However, as the British economy worsened toward the end of the 1980s, and by November of 1990, Thatcher had resigned. John Major was selected as Prime Minister, hailing the ERM as his victory. While it was the start of a very successful political career, Major's Britain economic issues started to bubble. UK's economy was already in recession when it joined the ERM. The British pound was already a fragile currency, with the UK's inflation rate being 3 times higher than Germany's. If the Bank of England cut rates, it would help the British economy, but it would devalue the pound so much that Britain would have to leave the ERM, which of course, John Major would never allow. Soros was aware of this situation and he was waiting for the right moment to act. Between 1990 and 1992, the British economy suffered to the extent that just keeping the interest rate high was not enough to maintain the pound's value. And so, throughout these 2 years, the Bank of England would frequently go to the market and start buying up pounds by the millions, using up its foreign exchange reserves in the process. But that didn't help either. The pound got weaker and was barely in the limits to be in the ERM. And it had to devalue sooner or later. And it happened when the man of the hour stepped in, George Soros. He knew that almost everyone was ready to bet against the British pound if only there were some sort of bad news that could trigger a stampede big enough to overwhelm the Bank of England. Starting in August 1992, Soros and his fund began building a position against the pound. By the end of August, Soros had slowly built up a position equivalent to $1.5 billion against the pound. But the exchange rate had barely moved. But he was looking for some news to increase his position. Lucky for him, on the 16th of September, the president of the Bundesbank held a seemingly innocent interview that Soros could nevertheless use. The same night when Europe was asleep, he called up any bank, company, or any entity that could have had British pounds and borrowed them successfully. By the next morning, Soros had sold the equivalent of $10 billion worth of pounds on the open market. Unsurprisingly, the Bank of England was in complete chaos. John Major had an emergency meeting, and the Chancellor of the Exchequer began a desperate fight. On 8:40 a.m. on September 17th, he authorized purchasing £1 billion from the market, but the value didn't move a bit. By 9 a.m., he purchased another £2 billion. At this point, he called John Major again to request the permission to increase the interest rate. That would have been another punch to already on Britain's ground economy. By the end of the day, Britain had purchased £27 billion and had increased its interest rate a second time to 15%. But just Soros alone had sold about half as many pounds. At 7:30 p.m., the British government accepted defeat with the following news conference. A unique day in London's financial markets ended with the Chancellor announcing that the pound was being suspended from the ERM. The second of two dramatic interest rate rises during the day was, after all, cancelled. Over the next few days, the British pound fell by 15% against the German mark and 25% against the US dollar. And Soros was up $1 billion from their trade. By 1997, the British pound was actually more valuable than it had been during the ERM, and the UK was on its way to 16 consecutive years of economic expansion. So much so that some people actually call them the White Wednesday. So, in the end, Soros might have actually done the British a favor, even though he pocketed about $15 to every human in Great Britain despite their age. And there it is, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you at the next one.